Stop right there. You think omens are candlelit prophecies and wise old women muttering cute but wrong. Real omens are sweaty, biological, electrical, and smelly, the kind of sensory warnings your brain labels as weird until a disaster slams down. Over the next 15 omens, I'll show you how nature coughs up clues, sometimes poetic, often gross, and why people ignored them at their peril. You think an omen is mystical symbolism. Actually, it's an observable anomaly that often precedes catastrophe, an animal acting off, water behaving badly, or the sky doing weird neon tricks. Science calls these proximate signals. Physical changes caused by stresses in the environment. They don't whisper fate, they whisper physics, chemistry, and survival instincts that sometimes line up like warning. You assume if nature screams we'd all hear it. But omens are subtle and human brains are lazy pattern seekers addicted to routines. We rationalize. The birds left because it's Monday, the fog is just humidity, the lights were flickering because someone forgot to pay a bill. That's how small signals become invisible until they compound into a sentence you can't unread. Something catastrophic is coming. You think pets are just cranky. In reality, animal agitation is a prime omen. Dogs, cats, elephants, and even zoo animals will pace, howl, or flee hours to days before earthquakes and tsunamis. Their senses pick up infrasound, gas leaks, tiny ground motions, and changes in air chemistry. Things our noisy lives mask. So when dogs lose their minds, pay attention instead of rolling your eyes. You think the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was sudden and incomprehensible. Survivors reported animals behaving like they smelled the ocean's betrayal before the wall of water arrived. Elephants were seen stampeding inland and dogs ran away from beaches. Sensory alarms triggered by seismic energy and unusual water behavior. Those anecdotes don't make a prophecy, but they do reveal how non-human senses sometimes notice disaster sooner than we do. You think migrations are seasonal rituals. Actually, sudden, large-scale animal movements can be red flags. When entire flocks or herds shift direction, abandon territories, or cross human borders en masse outside usual patterns, it often signals environmental stress, earth tremors, gas releases, or collapsing ecosystems that can precede larger disasters like earthquakes or ecological collapse. You think earthquakes come without warning. Chang in 1975 is the mythbuster. Authorities noticed unusual animal behavior and swarms of insects, along with small foreshocks, and evacuated the city, reportedly saving lives. Scientists debate how much credit animals deserve, but this episode shows how multiple omens stacked together sometimes trigger a life-saving human response. You think dead birds are spooky but random. Mass bird falls are a different beast. When thousands of birds drop from the sky or are found dead on beaches, scientists look for toxins, fireworks, or atmospheric shocks. Historically, bizarre bird mortalities have sometimes clustered before storms, volcanic events, or mass die-offs. Messy, gross, and impossible to ignore. You assume bird die-offs have neat explanations. Beebe, Arkansas in 2011 dumped tens of thousands of starlings on the streets. Fireworks were suspected but no definitive cause pinned down, and the timing felt apocalyptic to locals. Whether omen or accident, the sensory shock, smell, chaos, dark feathers like wet tar, left an imprint that feels like nature's dinner bell for something being very wrong. You think insects are annoying, they can be disaster precursors. Sudden swarms, locusts, cicadas, or ants often indicate ecological imbalance, drought, unusual heat, or habitat collapse. Those swarms can herald food shortages, crop failures, and social unrest, making them less of a quaint nature show and more of a living, buzzing red flag for cascading disasters. You think famines strike out of nowhere. History says otherwise. Recurrent locust plagues wiped crops and precipitated famine across Africa, Asia, and the American plains, turning insect swarms into economic and human disasters. The clack of beetle wings and the smell of chewed stalks were sensory omens long before governments realized food systems were failing. You think fish deaths are isolated pollution events. They can be early warnings. Sudden mass fish die-offs or mass beachings sometimes follow underwater disturbances, algal blooms fueled by warming and nutrient overload, or gas releases, everything that hints at an ecosystem about to collapse or be violently rearranged. The stench, the slick of scales, and the birds circling are sensory alarms for people who care to notice. You might shrug off trawlers returning empty, but in some coastal disasters, fishermen reported dead or absent fish before a catastrophic event. In areas later hit by underwater landslides or toxic spills, prior abnormal fish behavior was an early clue. The ecological smell, rot and iron blended with human dread, and patterns emerged when local knowledge was paid attention to. You think rain is just wet. Then it falls red or oily and your brain flips. Colored rain, oily mists, or powdery fallout can signal volcanic ash, algae blooms, or airborne pollutants from industrial accidents, and even comet dust in sensational cases. Those nauseating, metallic smells and the grit between your teeth are more than poetic. They're precursors of environmental upheaval. You think volcanic eruptions arrive with a single blast. Contemporary accounts of Vesuvius mention fetid air and choking mist beforehand. Pliny the Younger wrote of strange odors and hazes preceding the 79 AD eruption, nauseous sulfur tang, sediment in the air, sensory cues that the mountain was chemically prepping for violence. Those gross, choking omens are classic prelude material. You think smells are subjective, certain odors are physical alarms. Ozone tang, rotten eggs from hydrogen sulfide metallic copper in the air, these indicate electrical discharge, volcanic gases, or organic decay. People often report nauseating scents minutes to days before quakes or eruptions, and while smell is easy to dismiss as imagination, it's rooted in real chemical precursors. You might blame bad eggs, but villagers near active volcanoes often report a sulfur stench hours or days before an eruption. Those gases rise as magma shifts and fractures underground, making the air taste of metal and rot. It's gross, it's scary, and it's an actionable piece of information if authorities and communities are paying attention. You think strange lights mean UFOs, often they're the Earth rubbing its temples. Earthquake lights, glowing pillars, luminous clouds, and streaks have been reported before major quakes like Tangshan and Kobe. These bizarre auroras probably come from stressed rocks releasing charges, ionizing the air and turning the sky into an electric freak show before the ground gives way. You think post-quake science explains everything, but eyewitnesses of major quakes sometimes describe eerie lights beforehand. In accounts of the 1976 Tangshan quake and earlier events, residents saw luminous glows and columns of light, visuals that terrified and confused them. Modern research links these flashes to piezoelectric effects in stressed rocks, turning a mysterious omen into a mildly less supernatural physics trick. You think electronics fail because of poor wiring, sometimes the planet itself meddles. Unexplained radio noise, static from telegraphs, and wandering compass needles have been reported before earthquakes and geomagnetic storms. Those electromagnetic disturbances can indicate charged rock movements or space weather, and they make modern devices squeal like an animal about to bolt. You might think telegraph problems were just old tech acting up. But during the Carrington event of 1859, telegraphs sparked and sent messages with no power source thanks to geomagnetic fury. That electromagnetic chaos is the ancestor of modern reports, where radios hiss and instrumentation glitches before major space or geophysical events. The planet can interrupt your inbox when it's mad. You think quakes are silent surprises. Sometimes the Earth warns you with deep freight train rumbles. Audible ground rumblings, low-frequency booms, and strange subterranean thumps can precede larger seismic events as cracks propagate and stresses release. Those visceral vibrations are physical warnings, like a monster clearing its throat, ignored at our peril. You might dismiss a low roar as a truck, but in many quakes there are foreshocks and audible rumblings beforehand. Communities describe a crescendo of small booms, the ground singing like distant thunder, foreshocks that sometimes give enough time to move away from danger. The trick is taking them seriously when they're small, not loud. You think a blackout is just bad infrastructure. Sudden, unexplained power flickers can be omen-like. They may come from stress transformers as ground movement shifts loads, or from electromagnetic disturbances tied to solar storms. When lights blink and electronics hiccup in odd patterns across a region, it's a noisy symptom that something larger might be misfiring. You might chalk flickers up to overloaded circuits, but during intense storms or solar events, whole grids can wobble before disaster. People report synchronized dimming, radios warbling, and clocks losing time, small electronic hiccups that sometimes foreshadow bigger power disruptions or reveal stressed infrastructure heading toward failure. You think the ocean is just big and stupid. When it withdraws, it's a screaming omen. Tsunamis often start with a sudden recession of water that exposes the seabed, an ancient and direct warning. Inland, springs and wells that surge or dry up can indicate underground shifts. Water's mood swings are literal physical signals that something below is breaking. You probably think tsunamis are silent surprises. Many victims say the sea simply fled first. During the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami and the 2011 Tohoku disaster, people reported the terrifying sight of water pulling back, exposing the seabed, an ancestral omen long ignored by the uninitiated. Those who recognized it and ran uphill survived. The rest paid a steep, watery price. You think plants have infinite patience? Sudden plant sickness can be an early biological whisper of danger. Rapid leaf drop, unexplained wilting, or unusual fruiting sometimes follows gas emissions, groundwater contamination, or heat anomalies near volcanic or industrial activity. The taste in the air, drooping foliage, and odd sap exudations are botanical SOS signals if you can read them. You might think dying leaves are seasonal. Near active volcanoes, vegetation can brown and curl from toxic gases long before an eruption. The sight of whole slopes going from green to sickly is a gross but clear signal. Soil chemistry and air quality are being poisoned. Locals sometimes notice this and move away, but far too often the warning goes unheeded until the blast. You think storms always roar in, sometimes they lie silent. The calm before the storm is literal in tornadoes and hurricanes, a strange glassy quiet with birds perched like statues and an uncanny barometric stillness. That eerie silence is a sensory reset that often precedes the violent reintroduction of wind, water, and terror. You might think sirens are your only cue, but many tornado survivors describe an odd silence moments before impact. The air goes still, birds vanish, and a hateful hush settles like a lid, followed by the sonic freight train of destruction. That silence is often one of the most unsettling, and if recognized, actionable omens before a funnel arrives. You think dreams are private and meaningless. Sometimes entire communities report similar nightmares before disasters. Mass premonitions, shared dreams, recurring themes of water or collapse pop up in folklore and contemporary anecdote. While science is skeptical, these reports dovetail with heightened anxiety, electromagnetic effects on brain activity, or social contagion. Either way, the phenomenon is eerie and worth noting. You think mass dreams are spooky superstition, but after the 2004 tsunami, many survivors reported waking nightmares about the sea days earlier. Some interpreted dreams as psychic warnings, others as anxiety amplified by environmental cues. Even if not supernatural, the shared panic and heightened attention to subtle signals made dreams an unusual cultural omen that spurred action for some. You think omens are random. Often they cluster because the same physical processes cause different symptoms. Stressed rocks can release gas, charges, and tiny tremors, producing smells, lights, and animal agitation together. Likewise, ecosystem stress creates insect blooms, fish die-offs, and plant wilting simultaneously. Multiple sensory signals from a single underlying breakdown that together form a coherent warning. You assume scientists dismiss omens as superstition. They do, then go back to collecting data. Researchers cringe at anecdotes but pay attention when multiple independent signals line up and the physics make sense. The modern approach is triangulation. Combine human reports with sensors and models to treat omens as testable hypotheses, not fairy tales. You think every weird event is meaningful. It is. Real signals show consistency across time, space, and different modalities, animals, sensors, chemistry, all pointing in the same direction. Coincidences are isolated blips. True omen patterns are reproducible, measurable, and interpretable with physics. So skepticism should be paired with good data collection, not denial. You think ignoring a weird feeling is fine. It is. If you notice multiple omens, animals freaked out, water behaving odd, strange lights, move to higher ground if near coast, unplug sensitive gear, listen to official channels, and gather neighbors. The goal isn't panic. It's buying time and reducing harm by treating certain sensory clusters as actionable risk indicators. You think omens are infallible. They're not. False positives happen, fireworks can kill birds, a factory leak can stench a seaside town without a quake, so governments and communities must balance false alarms against missed warnings. The tragedy is often social. When authorities repeatedly cry wolf or ignore citizen reports, trust crumbles and future omens get discounted when they matter most. You think omens are poetic and quaint. Romanticizing them gets people killed. Treating omens as fate rather than data turns smell and behavior into superstition instead of prompts for action. The useful approach is unromantic. Gather, verify, and respond, because believing in mystery without preparedness is an indulgence that has cost lives. You think gadgets ruin mystery. they actually save lives. Modern seismometers, air composition sensors, and satellite imagery can validate or debunk anecdotal omens quickly. Coupling human reports with sensor networks turns gut feelings into usable early warnings, letting us act on the creepy hunches that used to be written off as superstition. You think only scientists can detect danger. Neighborhoods are sensors too. Local knowledge, fishermen, farmers, elders, often perceives early signs faster than distant agencies. When authorities listen and integrate community reports, response becomes faster and smarter. When they ignore local omens, disasters get brutalized by social blind spots. You think ignoring a weird smell or a flock of fleeing birds is harmless. The cost can be human lives. History is full of preventable tragedies where local sensory warnings were dismissed as superstition or infrastructure failed to respond. The sorrow isn't just physical loss. It's the gnawing knowledge that tiny, gross, unsettling signs were missed or muffled by bureaucracy. You think nothing must be done until an official alarm. That's a gamble. Pack essentials, confirm evacuation routes, help neighbors, especially those without mobility, and keep battery-powered communication ready. Acting on multiple correlated omens is cheap insurance. Indecision when the sky looks wrong or the birds vanish is an expensive gamble. You think omens are quaint lore. Now see them as a messy sensory early warning system. From animal agitation and mass migrations to strange lights, smells, and receding seas, these 15 omens show how the natural world often sends gross, prickly clues before disaster. The dark truth, noticing these signs and acting, can mean the difference between scrambling and surviving. You think it's safe to wait for confirmation. In crises, confirmation often comes too late. The sensible, slightly paranoid move is to document anomalies and share them with trusted channels. If the hair on your neck stands up, write it down. Those greasy, weird observations are the raw data that sometimes saves lives when taken seriously. You think feeling alarmed is useless. It isn't. Make a plan, pack a small kit, and listen to both instruments and neighbors. Acting on sensible information beats romantic complacency. If this ruined your appetite for myth and pumped you full of practical dread, good, subscribe for more reality checks.